From the Gulf States Newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm sports and cultural reporter Joseph King, chopping it up this week. There are a lot of important benchmarks when it comes to predicting how kids will succeed in school. Near the top of that list are third-grade reading skills. Being a stronger reader in third grade sets a student up for the rest of their time in school. And a lack of reading skills can also just snowball and drag students further behind year after year. The good news in the Deep South is that our states are actually leading the way here. Mississippi was once at the bottom when it came to third-grade reading levels. Now it's close to the top. Alabama and Louisiana are climbing the ranks faster than other states. And Louisiana is getting even more serious about third-grade reading. Starting this year, students who don't pass a reading test or qualify for an exemption will be held back. That's already the law in Alabama and Mississippi. To talk with me about this is WWNO and WRKF's education reporter, Aubrey Uhas. Hey, Aubrey.
Hey, Joseph.
Okay, before we get to the tests, how are our states making so much improvement when it comes to reading?
Yeah, I'm going to start by asking you a question. Have you heard of the Mississippi Miracle?
I'm afraid to say I have not heard of the Mississippi Miracle.
That's okay. It's really, a phrase that has been used a lot in education circles, and it refers to Mississippi's climb over the last decade, from being, like you said, kind of at the near bottom in terms of early reading scores to the top. And, you asked, how are we making so much improvement here in the Gulf South? And it's really because of this concerted long-term effort. And here in the Gulf South, we've had this commitment to a few things. The science of reading, for one, which is making sure kids are being taught to read using research-backed practices. Early monitoring, so identifying kids who maybe have deficits, kids who maybe have dyslexia, and then making sure that those kids are getting help early. So it isn't about, holding back a ton of kids, but doing everything you can to make sure the kids are ready.
Now, getting better is all well and good. It sounds great. But it's not just about improvement. Where do our states rank when it comes to third grade reading?
Yeah. So Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, a decade ago, were all at the bottom in terms of, national rankings. Now they are kind of middle of the pack. And if you look at growth, like we were talking about, they're at the top. Now, to kind of unpack the national rankings some more, we have a national average. And I think the assumption sometimes is okay, we're doing really well in growth, but maybe we're still not doing as well as the rest of the country. We are. So on the most recent Nations Report Card, which is kind of the best national assessment we have of reading progress as a country, I think it was Mississippi and Louisiana were above the national average, and Alabama was just a point below. So it isn't just that we are, doing better. We're now holding our own with the rest of the country. And that's even more impressive because, we know that our kids here in the Gulf South come to kindergarten behind. They're less likely to go to preschool. They're more likely to come from, homes that are in poverty, meaning there maybe aren't books at home or their parents maybe didn't graduate from high school. So that makes this growth all the more impressive.
But reading scores are down nationally, right? Is it because of COVID and remote learning? I was in college during that time, so I understand it was tough. Yeah, that is a part of it. When we talk about that national average, it is falling. Hard to point to any one thing. Some research shows that the declines were starting even before the pandemic, that it maybe has to do with the way we were teaching reading in the past decade that was not always backed by science, and therefore made it harder for more children to learn how to read. Now we know that COVID obviously played a part of it because it impacted attendance. It was obviously much harder for young kids to learn how to read over Zoom as opposed to in person. But I think as we move forward, in the next couple of years, we're going to have kids in school who, were not impacted by the pandemic because they weren't born yet. And that will really start to show us what the strengths and weaknesses are here, what are the biggest issues, what is working against kids, and what is working for them. It tends to slip my mind that COVID was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So what's the next thing being done to get reading scores even higher in Louisiana?
Yeah, so it's this reading law that says, if you are a third grade student, you cannot go on to the fourth grade unless you pass a test or qualify for an exemption, so that if kids have dyslexia or they're, new to the country and still learning how to speak English, they can still move on, under that policy. But this is the law that Mississippi has had for a really long time, Alabama has had for a few years, and is kind of the final piece of the puzzle here. And it's, it's really stressful to roll something like this out. No one wants to hold back kids. So I went to summer school earlier this month to see what it looks like here in Louisiana, the anxiety and the pressure and just what it looks like to try to help these kids one-on-one. I'm going to take you into the classroom with me now. And, it's summer, obviously, and we're in the South, so the AC was on full blast. Emily Gertner is sitting at a small table in the corner of her third grade classroom at Moscona Elementary in Metairie. She calls students over one at a time to assess their reading skills.
If you don't know a word, it's okay. Just skip it and keep going. Are we ready?
Today it's something called oral fluency, the ability to read aloud accurately and quickly. That's why it's timed.
I wrote before dawn and said out for her.
It's a tall girl named Carolina's turn. She reads a passage titled, "To Be a Poet."
Good. Stop right there. You stopped at the word from. We had one little mistake.
Gertner counts the words Carolina read correctly.
So, my friend, 116 words. Did you beat the goal? What? Yes, you did. High five. Good job. I'm very proud of you. Let's keep up that good work.
Carolina is so happy, she skips back to her seat. She's here in summer school because based on her test scores, she's behind in reading. And under a new state law, could have to repeat third grade. There are some exemptions, like if a child is diagnosed with dyslexia or is new to the country and still learning to speak English. Carolina will retake the test at the end of the month to see if she can start fourth grade in August. Gertner says she's making progress.
It really shows me that this process works.
During the first week of summer school, Gertner says Carolina practiced reading tricky words and blending letter sounds.
But I actually think it's her confidence level that has been boosted so much just with this environment here. It's a smaller group setting than a normal class size.
Just 15 kids and 2 adults. The policy is a big change for schools and a big challenge for teachers.
It is not easy to teach a child to read.
Laura Roussel is the chief academic officer in Jefferson Parish. Schools have had a year to prepare, and she says they're ready.
We don't feel nervous about what we're doing right now.
Schools are required by law to identify students starting in kindergarten who might need extra help, provide them with tutoring, and notify their parents. Roussel says this targeted approach is important.
How are we moving right now to do what we can do to close this gap?
And the gap is closing.
We started with about 1,600 kids.
Roussel says by the end of last school year, the number of third graders who were behind in reading had dropped by more than half. Now just 300 kids could be held back. Many of them, like Carolina, are in summer school and have another chance to take the test. Kimyana Burke was in charge of implementing Mississippi's literacy reforms more than a decade ago. She says the point of a reading test isn't to hold kids back, but to make sure they get the help they need to pass.
All of these things are to keep retention from happening, which is why we call it retention as a last resort.
Like Louisiana, Mississippi trains its teachers in the science of reading and has invested tens of millions of dollars in tutoring.
So each year, fewer and fewer kids were retained.
Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, which also has a third grade reading test, has some of the most comprehensive reading policies in the country. And they've led to significant gains. Mississippi, once at the bottom in third grade reading, is now close to the top. And Louisiana and Alabama are climbing the ranks faster than any other states.
Take a deep breath in and out.
At Moscona Elementary, Emily Gertner is testing another student's oral fluency.
I woke before dawn and set out for Paris.
Diamond reads 80 words. Her goal is 114.
So what does that tell me we need to do next time?
Read faster.
Say that again. We need to do what?
Read faster.
We need to get a little bit faster.
She still has a ways to go, but Gertner remains upbeat.
I think you can get there. What do you think?
I think so.
I think you can too. Good job, my girl. We're going to try again next time.
Okay.
All right.
With a little more practice, she could still move on to fourth grade. In Metairie, I'm Aubrey Uhas.
The Gulf States Newsroom is a team of journalists working with NPR and local public media stations in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana to cover the issues that matter to you. Email us, connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org.
You're listening to the Gulf States Gumbo. I'm Joseph King. We're talking about how states in the Gulf South are pulling up their reading scores, and about Louisiana's new reading tests that'll hold students back who don't pass. Now, Aubrey, you talked about how things are going in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana's largest school district. Do we know how many third graders could be held back statewide?
So we won't know for sure until next school year because kids still have another chance to take the test, and there are these exemptions that I mentioned. The data point we do have is from April. About 75% of kids passed the test on the first try then. So we had, around 12,000 kids who were at risk. Now we're expecting that number to come down quite a lot. And if you, look at Jefferson Parish, they only have a couple hundred kids. So it should be hopefully a pretty small pool of kids that have to repeat the third grade.
I believe you said this is a massive change for schools. Has there been any pushback?
Yeah, it's definitely a massive change. I think holding kids back continues to be controversial because it can have negative impacts. If to be the bigger, older kid in your grade developmentally isn't always great for kids. But the main pushback I've heard has to do with the test that Louisiana is using. And this is a little bit wonky, so I won't go into too much detail. But in short, the test that the state is using is a screening tool. A screening tool meaning that it's used to check in to screen students for specific reading difficulties throughout the year. It's not an end-of-year exam that measures what students have learned over the course of the year. Every other state that has a law like this uses an end-of-the-year exam. Louisiana does not, and the concern has been, is the state using the right tool? The state says that they feel confident that they are using the right tool, and they do point out that our end-of-year test, the LEAP exam, is on that list of exemptions, so it is a part of the equation. But being out of step with this broader policy does make some educators and parents anxious.
Aubrey Uhas is WWNO and WRKF's education reporter. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
And now it's time for Gulf States Gems, a series that shines a light on some of the treasures of the region. Joining me to talk about this week's gem is WBHM's All Things Considered host, Kelsey Shelton. What's up, Kelsey?
Hello, Joseph.
All right, so tell me, what is your gem for us this week?
So my gem for you is Sidewalk Cinema. It is a local nonprofit indie movie theater here in Birmingham, Alabama. The theater's lobby is full of video games and film books, and they have TVs on the wall and they play music videos. There's a bar. Tons of movies are playing in there all the time.
You've talked about Sidewalk a lot. When I first heard about Sidewalk, I thought it was only a festival, and I thought it was just movies shown on a sidewalk. I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah, it does sound crazy. But you're not alone in that. A lot of people probably think it was just a film festival, including me. I wanted to see a movie here that was making the rounds in the indie film circles. I was like, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. I won't ever see this. And then when I Googled it, it was playing at Sidewalk. That is the only way I found out that this is not just a film festival. It's a whole theater with tons of movies, indie and big commercial hits. And yeah, they have it all.
I haven't been at Sidewalk, but I plan on going in the future. Kelsey Shelton is WBHM's All Things Considered host. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
This week's show is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations, WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Again, I'm your host, Joseph King. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.